Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's UCLA Alumni Town Hall with Chancellor Block, hosted by the President of the UCLA Alumni Association, Anne Wang. My name is Joseph Blancas, and I serve as an Associate Director at the UCLA Alumni Association. The UCLA Alumni Town Hall Series is a gathering place where Bruins can have their voices heard, ask essential questions, and receive transparency and expertise. In today's program, Chancellor Block and Anne Wang will discuss UCLA's true promise and power, its faculty, students, alumni, and staff. Today, you'll hear how they are reshaping the world, as well as about UCLA's accomplishments, challenges, and innovations. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our Alumni Association sustaining donors. It's with your help that we are able to strengthen the Bruin community with programs like this. For some general webinar housekeeping, we'll have time at the end of our program for a Q&A with Chancellor Block. So please email your questions to the email provided in the chat. We will also be recording the event and we'll share it out once it's available. Now, to start our program, I'm excited to introduce our UCLA Alumni Association President, Anne Wang. Anne is an entrepreneur, consultant, and producer who was named Forbes 30 Under 30 Social Entrepreneur in 2016. She has built her own agency and creative studio that intersects entertainment, media, tech, and nonprofits to generate lasting social and cultural changes. Anne holds a bachelor's degree in international development studies from UCLA and has served on the Alumni Association board since 2016. Anne, thank you for being here. I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Joseph. I am so excited to welcome all of you here. Thank you for being here on such a rainy day if you are in Los Angeles. But we are so grateful here at the Alumni Association for you all to be joining us in a very special town hall with the one and only Chancellor Gene Block. He needs absolutely no introduction at all, but Chancellor Block has served as our chancellor for now, over a decade, since 2007, and has really overseen our university's three-part mission of education, research, and service. And as Joseph mentioned, today is just a special chance to get a sense of Chancellor Block's reflection of the last couple of years, and of course, to share the vision of where our university is going in the future. So Chancellor Gene Block, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be here, and as I was mentioning, our alumni love you dearly. So the chance for us to really spend an hour together, to listen, to learn, to engage, and ask you some questions is just a treat. So thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Anne. Thank you.
Of course. So let's start with, the years that we've been going through. It has definitely been maybe a little bit chaotic, looking at the pandemic, looking at the social challenges that we've had. So for many universities, it has been chaotic. So talk to us a little bit about how UCLA has fared during the pandemic, how things have maybe shifted and changed, and really if you feel like things are returning to a normal, not so normal environment this academic year.
Thank you. So it has been chaotic, and I think that's true for all institutions, higher education institutions, but all institutions and in society worldwide. This has been truly a global pandemic with global implications, certainly. So it's been challenging. I'd say, if I had to try to be fair about this, I think UCLA's fared better than many institutions, higher ed institutions, but with impact. So, when the COVID crisis first happened, we had to, of course, make a very quick conversion to remote education, with its challenges. But also that meant most of our students leaving the residences and no longer receiving meals. So there was a huge number of people working for UCLA who no longer really had much to do initially, because we served 30,000 meals a day, and we had thousands of people living in our residences. But we made a commitment to keep all of our employees. At the time, it was the ethical decision. In the end, it turned out to be even a smart decision, because it's we've lost a lot of employees even when you retain all of your employees. So I'd say those challenges are great and they have impact. I mean, we did run a pretty large deficit in some areas like housing and hospitality, and it'll take some years to pay that back, but we'll be able to pay that back. But I think we're much closer to normal operation now. Obviously, our living units are full, our classrooms are full. We're still having to be very careful because we're strongly recommending masking indoors because COVID's not over. You know, we may be done with COVID, but COVID's not done with us fully. But it's a different disease now, and it can be much more easily managed. So in that sense, we're back to normal. Our research laboratories are doing very well. Bonanza year in terms of funding this last year, I think $1.7 billion in extramural support. So I think those are doing well. Our classrooms are pretty much back to normal, but there have been changes on campus. And interestingly, the changes are not in the educational program. The changes are actually in our staff and how they work. So during COVID, of course, many of our staff could leave the campus and work remotely. And it turned out, to the surprise of everyone, that remote work for many employees is extremely good, extremely effective. They enjoy working at home. The transit to campus is so painful for some of our employees. It was easier for them to work at home, at least, several days a week. So as we come through this crisis, this COVID crisis, it's interesting. The educational sort of programs have not changed very much, but the nature of work has changed a lot. So I think that's probably the largest change that has happened. I would say we have gotten much better at using remote tools for education, remote platforms, and that should have impact in the long run about how we can offer programs, especially for alumni, I should imagine. These are really powerful tools, but academia is very conservative. And it is very hard to change. And I'm often warned by people that have been in other industries that have been turned upside down, like the entertainment industry, that why do you think you're immune? And I think that's a warning. And maybe we haven't changed enough. Maybe the change in work with our staff was more in line with how society is changing, and academia has not changed so much. So we may be changing more in the future as we recognize we have new tools. But quickly, I would say that overall, I think we've come through this very well, and we've learned we've developed some new tools, and we've certainly learned a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Chancellor Block, because I think the possibility of learning in different environments has opened up, and that's true for both students as well as you mentioned alumni. Being able to think about learning, yes, in the classroom, really effective with the structure is still critical, number one. And then how do you think about supplemental learning in and outside of the classroom for long term? Have you felt a shift from students in that way as well, where maybe there's a more optimistic perspective of different ways of learning?
So interestingly, at least the initial surveys that we had, students were as conservative as faculty about these. Students thought the gold standard is in-person, high-touch learning, being in the classroom. And I think they haven't changed that view. I think as with faculty, as students are beginning to recognize, but under certain conditions, the remote education, methodology might be beneficial, might be preferred. So if you're in a large introductory chemistry classroom with several hundred students,
right,
that's a time when you actually can probably learn just as effectively remotely, and then come to class for a small lab section or something in person. So I think you're right. I think that the hybrid approach to education is being more appreciated, but we heard pretty clearly from our students they don't want to be fully remote. They really want to have the opportunity. And I think that's one of the defining characteristics of being on the UCLA campus. You're in, a world-class city, you're on a beautiful campus. You have a chance to, if you're in the sciences, work in laboratories as an undergraduate or work in independent research in the humanities, social sciences. There's so much that's difficult to replace remotely that we have to be really careful. So I think this is just a careful sort of slowly beginning to integrate new technology into learning, but really listening to our students, because the students really are there and very honest about what's working for them and what's not.
Yeah, and for faculty, I know you mentioned maybe there's a little bit more rigidity to how that is done, but how has the hybrid model really impacted faculty's styles of teaching?
So, some faculty, I mean, it was very interesting. And a little bit this is age dependent and, how much of a digital native you are. And there was concern from some of our faculty, especially ones that weren't sort of digital natives. They were frightened by the transition. But what we found pretty quickly after the transition, faculty of all ages became very innovative, and some became truly innovative in using the technology in ways that probably strengthened their delivery, and some remain very positive about their experiences with remote education. It also has a leveling effect for some students that are hesitant to ask questions in class and
Mhm.
sit in the back and are a little bit shy, and all of a sudden online became easier. Putting questions in the chat became somewhat easier for students. So it may have some interesting sociological impact, and that's something that needs to be studied, whether certain groups of students may end up feeling more comfortable
Right.
in remote education. That needs to be studied. So there's lots to learn.
Yeah, and I'm sure the conversation around equitable access also is something to be studied in the hybrid model.
Absolutely. What I've heard from students in the past, and very clearly, is that it's often difficult for students, especially with either work obligations in the middle of the day or family obligations, to always be on campus. And some of our students have obligations that take them away. This gives them an opportunity in some cases to be able to continue their education even when they're not on campus full time. So that's an important element. So I think there is an equity piece to access. And as you know, there was students felt strongly, Disabilities Union and students felt very strongly that we need to work towards better access.
Mhm.
And certainly this is one of the tools to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in other news, talking about, outside of the existing campus, this past September, you announced a large physical expansion, one of the largest, I think, in our history, of the acquisition of two other properties. So one in Palos Verdes. Can you talk a little bit about how this opportunity arose and how our plans really fit into the vision of where UCLA is going with these properties?
Certainly. Well, it was news when it occurred, because as you say, we're pretty conservative about property acquisitions for certainly for undergraduate education. We do have certainly properties in many places, but often for housing or for other specialized activities. But this was quite different. So it was driven actually by an agreement that the University of California has with the state, with the governor and the legislature, to increase the number of California students attending UC institutions. And of course, there's some UC institutions that would love to grow. I mean, Merced is still in growth phase. Riverside sees opportunities for expansion. Several of the campuses said, we can take students. But then there's a couple of campuses that are heavily impacted because they're really quite full, and UCLA is one of them. Berkeley sort of fits in the same category of really not having a lot of space. So but we still have to take students. It wasn't as if the legislature was saying, "Oh, it's fine." Berkeley and UCLA don't have to take any students. We do, and several thousand students to add to our student body over the next several years. So then we have to think how to do this. And as I say, for Merced, it's literally, give us the support to build, give us the financial support to build buildings, and we will accept more students because we want to grow. For us, it wasn't that simple. So we came up with about 4 strategies. The first strategy was, let's speed up graduation. Some of groups of our students don't graduate as quickly as others. Let's try to get everybody up to the same graduation speed. The gold standard is 4 years or less. Let's see how quickly we can get students, everyone to graduate more quickly. That opens up more space. The second opportunity was just, as we were talking about, remote education. Can we offer more classes online? But as I mentioned, there's great hesitancy to fully online programs, but we could use that to reduce the load of people on campus at any one time. The third option is to change summer session into summer quarter, a true summer quarter where you have as many students on campus in the summer as every other quarter. And you might get a letter when, Darren, you've been accepted to UCLA and you'll be starting in June.
Wow.
Summer quarter will be your first quarter on campus. So that's a way to increase the student body, but it's very hard to do. There are lots of reasons why summer is a difficult time to create a full bona fide quarter. So the fourth option is grow your land. I mean, just grow property, find a way to actually expand the size of the campus. That's what drove this decision. So we're thinking about opportunities, and we had a number of places identified. And all of a sudden, this opportunity came up in Rancho Palos Verdes, where Marymount California University was closing its doors. That's a sad story, actually. That was a Catholic school, small school, that served a really diverse demographic of students. So they had all the right instincts, all the right mission, but COVID just made it impossible. They have heavily discounted tuition, and I think the end is just didn't add up. They couldn't pay their bills, so they decided the wisest thing was to close. So it wasn't a obviously a terrible experience for them, but they decided to sell the campus. We looked at the campus and we all fell in love with the campus. It looks out across the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful facility. I mean, it's not as if it need some upgrades. It clearly needs some upgrades, but it's a beautiful facility. So that was the first thing. We thought this was kind of a no-brainer. This is a place where students could really potentially enjoy going to school, attending classes. And then there's a second property where their housing is. It's former Navy housing that's actually in San Pedro. It's also sort of a very attractive facility, though, with a facility that would be really good for students, for small groups of students, up to about 500 students. So we decided to purchase it. Then the question is, will students actually go there?
Right.
And why go to little UCLA when you go to big UCLA? So it's going to have to be thematic. It's going to have to be compelling. And therefore, we've put together the Senate, the Academic Senate, and the administration's put together a committee to begin to look at future uses for the campus. If it's not highly innovative, students might not come.
Right.
And then we'll have a problem. Then that's going to be a challenge. So, but ideas that are being talked about, at least the ideas I've heard about, are captivating, like turning it into maybe a campus with zero carbon, zero refuse, really becomes UCLA X, our experimental campus for sustainability. So that's one thing where students who go there, might pick up a minor in sustainability or a certificate while they're there, but they'd have an opportunity to be part of an experiment. That this is going to be a campus with no refuse, and maybe we'll have hydrogen source there because it's pretty close to the port. Maybe we'll have photovoltaics on the roofs, which is a lot of surface area. I'm not sure what it would be, but it could be the kind of hook you need to get undergraduates to say, I'm going to spend my third year or my fourth year on this very special campus. Yeah. Or it might be a leadership academy, as we're talking about, where we bring students to teach, or an honors college, or, this is not up for me to decide. This is really for this group of really thoughtful people to come up with ideas. And I'm agnostic. All I need to have more students that we accept to UCLA spending some time at this new campus. I'm sorry I've gone on so long, but you can tell I get excited about this campus.
No apologies. I get excited about it too, because I just happened to drive by it the other day, and it is a stunning location. So absolutely, it makes sense to innovate in the why a student is there on campus. But I could also really see students, if they understand the value, why that is such a unique ecosystem that is a build upon the ecosystem you can have on campus, but in a totally different environment. So
close to the port, remember, so all of a sudden you have these opportunities, the support that the port has used a lot of expertise from UCLA in the past for supply chain modeling. There's an opportunity to use the port to contribute to the port, because they love having student interns, to contribute to the port, but also use that as one of the anchor ideas for why we should be there. Then there's AltaSea, there's also an opportunity for marine sciences, for the new blue economy. There's a lot of startups there are startups at AltaSea. Again, could we play a role there? I mean, again, uncertain, but there's so many opportunities because it's a different, as you say, different ecosystem, different part of the county. Yeah. With a lot of opportunity. And then, of course, we can reach out to the people in both San Pedro, the citizens, and in Rancho Palos Verdes, and offer opportunities through extension, UCLA Health, if it made sense.
Right.
Lots of different ways we can impact the community. We can do good and well there at the same time and solve our problem with accepting more students.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of keywords in there as you were expanding our physical location, which leadership, sustainability, and climate. You're talking about impacting not only local communities, but really, I think, internationally. Can you share a little bit about your vision of what UCLA as a brand and as one of the top research universities and the #1 public university, I will say, the vision that we have around impact and leadership, and how that one reflects, what we think about from a student perspective, but also from an alumni perspective.
Well, a couple observations. I love the number one. I mean, it's one rating. We love that one, that ranking, because we're number one, or tied for number one with Berkeley, to be accurate this year. But there are many rankings of various sorts. Some with research, research capacity. We're always in the top, 20, 25 in nearly any ranking, no matter how you do it. And some we're very proud of. Number one for one state university for veterans, which of course we're very proud of. So we have some very special designations, but we're in the pack of great universities. But I've always said, okay, it's one thing to be a great university in terms of your research and your education. That's wonderful. But wouldn't it be great to say you're the nation's most impactful university? Impactful university. And so what does that mean operationally? How do you define impactful? So I said, there's lots of ways of measuring it. One is your impact on students and their ability to become future leadership. And we have the kind of diverse student body that's exactly the kinds of students that you'd like to make great leaders, because we have to lead in a diverse society. It's changing rapidly, the demographics of California, but of the country. And imagine really educating the next generation of leaders. So being impactful is really focusing on leadership among our students. And being impactful is having research projects that really can move society in positive ways. Now, we have lots of very important research going on the campus, and I love, Chancellor Yang at Santa Barbara always says there's two types of research. There's research that's useful now, applied research, and there's research that's going to be useful, and that's basic research that eventually will be useful. That all research is useful and valuable. But we really do, as a public university, also think about really projects that can really move society in profound ways. And, example is the one I'm very familiar with, the Depression Grand Challenge. I mean, this is the leading cause of disability in the world, and we're making progress. We're really discovering some of the basic elements that go into, treating depression and measuring it. And so I think this is really important. So I think, being an impactful university really should be our goal. And that means, I think, goes along without saying it, you have to be excellent.
Right.
But you have to be a lot more than that. And we're specially poised to do that because of where we are in Los Angeles, our size, our diversity of not only our composition of our students and our faculty, but also of the interests we have. We're strong in the arts, we're strong in the social sciences, we're strong in the sciences. Engineering. It's unusual that a university has such balanced strength. Usually you have universities that specialize in biological sciences and are great there, but not so great in the arts. But we're kind of remarkable in the sense that we're, top ranked across the board, really.
Right. And I always love to, when I actually look at the numbers of our alumni and the diversity and the geography, we have alumni everywhere. I think we're well over, 500,000. But the reach is just incredible. And the impact that's already happening from our alumni are massive. And something that I want to dive into a little bit is just the priority of the Broome Promise, which might be a really new idea to a lot of alumni tuning in here. But as you mentioned, Chancellor Block, this is a university that has access to some of the most incredible knowledge, research, education, and balance perspectives across all of these areas, from life sciences to, research X, Y, and Z. So can you explain a little bit about the vision of the Broome Promise and that commitment to lifelong learning post-graduation?
I'm happy to, and I'll have to tell a little story, and I have to apologize if some alumni have heard this before, but this is the truth. And originally when I came up with this idea, and I should say, truth in advertising, the idea has evolved far from my original idea, and it's really the alumni that have done this, and leadership and alumni leadership that have really turned this into a beautiful concept. But the original idea was about 20 to 25 years ago, and running my research laboratory. One of my postdoctoral researchers came in one day and he's going to buy a new car. And I'm giving him, I'm saying, well, if you want a really reliable car, you'll get a Honda or a Toyota. Right. And he said, well, it's really interesting. The Koreans are now importing this Korean car called a Hyundai. He said, and it comes along with a lifetime warranty.
All
He
right.
said, now normally, he said, I get a Honda, but with a lifetime warranty, I'm going to get a Hyundai. And so then, years later, I thought, what a novel idea. That's the way you get people hooked, is with a lifetime warranty. And then when I came to UCLA and I sort of learned more about what we're doing in the, with alumni, I thought, why don't we offer alumni a lifetime warranty? And with a lifetime warranty would be, okay, you graduate from, when you graduate from us, we're with you forever. That is, you have some obligations. You got to stick with us. You got to stay involved. We want you to stay involved in UCLA, and you want to help UCLA in any way you can. But we want to offer you an opportunity that is, you have to get retrained and re-educated. That we'll be there as your partner. And it used to gall me when I have alumni tell me, well, I just picked up my master's degree from another university, or I just picked up a certificate from another university. I'm getting jealous, thinking, why go to another university? We should be your sole supplier of educational products. And that's where sort of it came. And then, of course, Julie Sina and the group and your leadership really began to think this through more carefully, and came up with this idea of a Bruin Promise, where literally we would link ourselves to alumni in meaningful ways, provide opportunities for courseware where appropriate, networking where appropriate, but the sort of one-stop shopping, that it would become a really powerful instrument for alumni to stay connected, because that's really to our advantage. I mean, Alumni Connected are alumni. They can help you in innumerable ways, recruit students, find jobs for young alumni, opportunities. So it's, I think, a great idea. And I think it's an idea it's being developed. It's going to be years before it's probably fully developed, but it's an exciting project. But I have to give everyone credit, and actually in the alumni group, for their work on this and their really thoughtful way of positioning it.
Well, I think I love that story, and I'm surprised I haven't heard it, but I think that spark, right, of this concept that UCLA has your back in your learning and your curiosity for every stage of your life. And what does that look like? So as Chancellor Block mentioned, this is an ideation phase. This is an iterative piloting phase. And the goal is to tap into the university's knowledge from certificate all the way to what an amazing faculty member or researcher has been doing, and our alumni getting access to that information first. So very excited about Bruin Promise, and definitely, for everyone who's joining us here, there will be more information as that rolls out to our alumni base.
So I have to give a shout out to D'Artagnan Scarza here, because D'Artagnan, it was your role at one time.
Yes.
I mean, when I mentioned this to him, he really helped. He just came alive and said, that's the idea. That's the concept we have to work on. So there's been a lot of folks that have helped move this along, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and I think it will stick. I think that's something that you saw in DART, is that it makes so much sense. And I will say, not a lot of universities are cracking that code. So we're very grateful and excited for the opportunity. I know there is a burning question that I have been punting a little bit, but every alumni here is so passionate about sports. So there are many that are interested in UCLA's plans to move our athletics from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten Conference. So can you share a little bit about the context of that move, and really how it serves the students and the larger university and alumni ecosystem?
Sure. Well, this was a difficult decision, and it turned out to be a pretty controversial decision too. And obviously emotions run very high and on both sides of this issue. The background is that athletics, college athletics, is in enormous flux right now, and there has been quite a bit of reaffiliations of teams with new conferences. That certainly has happened over time. But there's other name, image, and likeness, and other elements that have made have really changed the playing field for athletics. And in addition, it's simply much more expensive to support large numbers of teams. You remember that for most universities, and I think this is almost true for all of them, really there are only a few revenue generating sports. And it comes down to, at least historically, it's been men's basketball and largely football that have driven most of the revenue. And the rest of the sports are supported by those revenues. So, for example, we have 25 sports. 2 of them really are supporting the others, although a few are closer to being self-sustaining, but most are not self-sustaining. You really have to pay for it. You really have to find a way to support it. So it's gotten very expensive to support athletics. So you have to make certain that you can optimize the amount of return. And optimizing the return means first, obviously, strong media contracts. That's important. Filling seats, having games at times when your fans will come out or when they're willing to turn on, not playing games sometimes late at night when you can't get your audience. So there's a lot of drivers that make this a much more complicated business. And you have athletes now that are very interested in national exposure because of name, image, and likeness. They're stars. They're stars before they arrive at UCLA. They want to maintain their visibility on social media, and it's important for them because for their future. And I'm not at all opposed to name, image, and likeness. It's hard to apply well, and there's a lot of pathology in it. But the basic idea of an athlete, being compensated for their extraordinary abilities, I understand it. Let's put it that way. I truly understand it. All of that convinced us that the future probably was with a conference that was going to be more global, more national. I should say more national. We thought was a stronger trajectory, and I say that I've been a loyal member of the Pac-12, and I've gone only to Pac-12 schools for my education. So I'm certainly loyal, and I'm fond of all the presidents and chancellors in the Pac-12. So it was hard. But I just thought in the end, UCLA's future would be better served by being in the Big Ten. We would be more attractive, and it's already happening, more attractive to recruiting athletes from across the country and give us a much brighter sort of financial future to be able to keep all of our teams and keep them supported and be able to provide the additional support that student athletes need. And we know they need more support. And we've agreed to, significant increases in nutritional support for all of our athletes, psychological support, counseling, academic support, as well as obviously there'll have to be a lot more chartering. That all said, there's some areas here we're going to have to just look at very carefully. The students will travel more, they'll travel longer. And we're going to have to watch what impact that has on their academic performance and whether we can actually supplement sufficiently with expertise, with educational expertise to make up for that. So I think this is, in that sense, an experiment. We're going to have to work hard, watch how our athletes are doing, watch how they're faring psychologically. And we're pretty confident that we'll be able to make this transition successfully. We'll obviously share information with USC. Their athletes are going to face many of the same challenges and work to be successful. So I'm pretty confident it'll be successful. I'm also pretty confident it will keep UCLA athletics strong, and it keeps us with a traditional rivalry with USC, which is, we complain about them a lot, but we need them. This is a rivalry that everybody wants to see every year, wants to see our teams compete, and it would not have made much sense to be in two different conferences. That was really important as well.
Yeah, I know, it's so funny. We can't be without them, and yet we do complain.
Can't live with them, can't live without them,
I think it's the sign of a healthy rivalry. And I did hear also, I wasn't at the basketball game, the USC UCLA basketball game, but that was a nail biter. So that's why this rivalry works. It's an incredible draw for athletics in general, not just in basketball, but across all of the sports.
But I have to emphasize, it wasn't an easy decision. And it's one we're going to have to be very mindful of as we move forward. I think, my belief is it will benefit all of our student athletes, but we'll have to be very careful how we do this.
Yeah, and that's what I've continuously heard is the determined focus on the student experience. Because this is, yes, it's about the larger eyes and media and conference itself, but so much what I think our, Chancellor Block and of course our athletics department has focused on is how does this impact the individual student experience? So
that's right. And, and has to benefit and really has to benefit all of our student athletes.
Right. And especially alongside mental health, that's something that we do hyper focus on with the Depression Grant Challenge. This is an opportunity, right, with athletics as well. So.
Yeah, I should say again, to give a shout out to our student athletes. It's our student athletes who've gone on to professional sports who have been the most honest about the mental health challenges. And that has really opened up. The discussion's really been opened up by some of our players, our former players being willing to talk about some of the challenges, which we were not so aware of. I would say I always thought that, they live such disciplined lives. You think that maybe they wouldn't have the same, the different kinds of stresses on them, but clearly extraordinary stress on our student athletes.
Right, right. So switching gears over to some more recent UCLA news, which is around the strike. So, that affected the entire UC system, the undergraduate and graduate, teaching assistant, student researchers, the postdocs were represented by the United Auto Workers, and they were on strike for most of November and December. So just provide us your perspective on that. How did we get to that point, and what were some of the outcomes from the negotiation?
Yeah, so it was, it was a terrible experience for everyone on all sides of this. I think, I remember it separated, it made difficult relationships in research laboratories where you had student researchers who, had to not work when they knew it was having impact on the grants that they're working on. It created friction in the classroom with graders and TAs who faculty were relying on, and now weren't going to be teaching during the strike. So it's painful. I mean, and I think and so where did it all come from? I don't know all the causes. I mean, there's a long set of potential reasons why we got to this point. Because certainly when I went to graduate school, we weren't at this point. We were all unbelievably thankful that you're getting a PhD and someone's paying for you, and all you have to do is, in my case, I do a little research, which I kind of wanted to do anyway. But has changed in as many years. And, part of it is the extremely high cost of living in California, quite frankly,
Right.
is one of the drivers. It's not the only driver. And I wouldn't say that for a second. There are other causes too. But a big cause has been the problem was when, I went to graduate school. I remember, I think it was $92 a month to pay for rent.
Wow.
If you were in the fancy rent, and I think if you wanted the place that required paint, they give you a gallon of paint, and it was $65 a month or something with a gallon of paint. So it's just the world has changed. Our students are paying a very large fraction of the amount of money they earn because they're only working part-time towards rent, and then they have other expenses. Graduate students are not like undergraduates. Many have families. They have other expenses that they have. It's a different life. They're not going to live under the same, not going to live 3 to a room. Most graduate students really, by the time they're a graduate student, would like to have a studio, so the housing requirements are different. It's a whole set of issues that made it, I think the frustration grew, especially with inflation. That's my sense. If I said there was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back, maybe it was the inflation that they just can't make ends meet. So, and I have some sympathy. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for that. The question is moving forward, how we can cover the additional costs.
Right.
And still maintain all that we want to do, and that's going to be a challenge. And we're trying to wrap our heads around right now, how we meet the additional costs of graduate students and postdocs, and you keep the university, moving ahead, and and obviously sufficiently funded to cover all these things. So in the end, so I have a lot of sympathy with students, and I'm happy that they'll be in better financial condition, and we have to figure out a way now to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. So Chancellor Block, when you're, looking at maybe it's called conflict resolution, but also just thinking about all the different components of the university and, various voices. You also mentioned, even in COVID, there were a couple of strikes, and we're talking about accessibility and access to education. What's been a lesson that you've learned coming out of some of that conflict resolution, and how you've, you and of course the larger team have really managed that?
So, and I think you have to be a good listener, number one, and you have to be patient and listen and not speak. I mean, that's one thing we learned, is that, and sometimes you hear narrative that you really can't agree with, and that sometimes it's even offensive. And then you find, if you listen a little longer, underlying it is some, and sometimes then it's first surface issues seem to be, not entirely rational or fair. But then as you listen more deeply to the issues, there's underlying issues that are much more genuine, authentic issues that you really have to address. So, part of this I just learned is that it's you have to be patient. I mean, with a student sit-in that happened, last year, we I think we did a good job by waiting. waiting and listening, and it evolved, and some of it was frustrating, and some of it wasn't exactly on the mark in my view, but much of it was. And it was sometimes students who just felt they didn't have a voice and needed to be heard. And that was important. And being heard means you listening and not talking. So what have I learned from it? I've learned to listen better. You have to listen better, and not always agree. And
Sure.
in the end, just like with the union, it was a compromise. I mean, the union didn't get exactly what it wanted, and we didn't get exactly what we were looking for, but it ends up being a compromise. But listening never hurts. And that's a start. I think I really have to applaud my team of vice chancellors that were mostly deeply involved in this, Vice Chancellor Monroe Gordon and others, for really extraordinary ability to work with students.
Mm.
And even when we couldn't fully align, we had respectful discussions.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the signal too of just how incredibly diverse UCLA's ecosystem is. There are so many perspectives, backgrounds, lived experiences, and being able to both support and really nurture that diversity for students, staff, faculty, as well as alumni, I've always heard as a major priority for the university. So I know UCLA has been investing a lot in faculty diversity in the past few years. How does, the conversation of diversity, equity really fit into the future strategy and strategic plan of the university?
Yeah. Well, and you said it better than I could say it. I mean, it's one of the great strengths of UCLA, and it leads to, better scholarship. It leads to better teaching, education. Diversity is really one of our as our strong point. That said, we're much prouder of our student diversity than our faculty diversity. And, there's some reasons for that. I mean, the students turn over every 4 years, approximately. The half-life of the student is short. The
Yeah.
half-life of a faculty, and I would say in California, faculty seem to live forever. It's a long, slow process. So to move the needle and remember, if you look back historically, faculty were not diverse at all.
Right.
And not diverse in terms of gender very much, and certainly not diverse in terms of ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds. So you've got to change that. And you remember, you're diluting, whatever you do gets diluted into a much larger group. So it's a slow process. And I think we've recognized over the last few years, it's too slow a process. And if we just keep trying to do it the way we're doing it the old-fashioned way, we're not getting anywhere. And we sort of learned that. So we tried to supercharge this effort to diversify the faculty, and yet do it in a way that is fair, equitable to everyone, and sort of obviously complies with all of our laws. And part of that is just figuring out strategies to create more diverse pools of candidates. By thinking creatively about how you advertise jobs to keep sometimes the bandwidth of the job a little broader, so you attract a little larger group of individuals. Or think about the areas you want to develop, thematic areas that you want to develop on campus that might be more likely for a person of color, for example, to apply to, because it just strikes them as a much more, it's closer to what they're interested in. So use a variety of tools to do that. But growing the campus gives us an opportunity to grow our faculty, so that helps speed it up too. You're not just in steady state. And we have some programs. We've created some programs that really focus on Black life experience, on the immigrant experience, really that many Latino scholars are interested in. And then we've put together this very big program, our deans called Faculty Forward, which is Faculty Forward is an attempt to really say over the long haul, we've got to diversify our faculty, and let's think about all the elements, and let's deal with all the elements, from making sure the environment here promotes staying here, that is comfortable, because you can hire and hire and hire, but if everyone's out the door in 5 years or 7 years, then you haven't succeeded, you get nowhere. So retention becomes really important too, and retention has to do with campus climate. Right. And how faculty feel being here, So I think we're actually poised to make progress. The last several years have been really encouraging. When I meet young faculty, it's really a very diverse group, very dynamic, diverse group, and some of the best faculty we've ever hired. The trick is keeping them here, keeping them on our campus, and that involves everything from making sure we can remain competitive with salaries, right, to making sure that every element of their experience here is positive. So that's the goal.
I love that you say, making sure that they feel comfortable and wanting to be on campus. And I also love that you're in your office on campus,
Yes,
right?
yes, and I have John Wood, and I have the Pyramid of Success back there, which I was given many years ago by the coach.
Yeah, no, I love it because I don't think many of us get to kind of visit your office as much as maybe we'd like. So this is a very, very special treat.
Been quiet since COVID. The office has been very quiet.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of end off here. I know we have maybe about 10 minutes left together with some lighter questions. I know you obviously from your background studied sleep and circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
So, I have two questions. What keeps you up at night? And then what gets you excited when you wake up? What gets you up in the morning?
So it keeps me up at night are, the big existential, threats to campus.
Sure.
And those change, I arrived with different ones that I have now, but, I do worry. I mean, I always worry about earthquakes. I have to be honest, even though we haven't had a real rattler in a while, that because the damage is so profound to campus, and with all the work we've done, with all the building and all just the enormous effort that everyone's put into building a beautiful campus, it can disappear in seconds, literally, and so that's one of the sort of just, background worries I always have. I do worry about campus climate regularly. It's actually unsettling when you get letters from students or faculty that they just feel the environment isn't supportive of them. And I do worry about, and that's one thing I do worry about, because, in a big campus, there's always pockets where there's issues. And that keeps me worried. I used to say I didn't worry about pandemic flu. That was at the bottom of my list. And now, of course, we have to worry about that too. But
Right.
I'd say that in these more immediate concerns I have is really the welfare for students and faculty, that they feel this is a great environment for them. And that's always a concern. And I do worry about, we do have always bad news happening, mistakes on campus, whether it's in the health system or other places that are very noteworthy when they happen and unfortunate. And that's always a concern. So just to give you a laundry list of stuff, I do go to sleep at night when I get tired, but it's
I
a
like
big
that
place.
it's prioritized.
Yeah,
though.
it's a big place, and ultimately you're responsible. So it can be upsetting if you think too deeply about all the challenges.
Sure. So maybe on the positive side is what gets you excited? What gets you up in the mornings?
It's several things. I would say that most students are just incredible, and we always joke that when I really need to be excited, just spend some time with students and their energy and their enthusiasm, their optimism, and the fact that we're just creating the next generation of leaders. I really believe it, and that's always energizing. So that's really positive. The other part is just discovery.
Yeah.
Our engineering faculty just sent me a list of projects his lab's working on with these new wearables that literally from your sweat can measure, stress levels, and just unbelievable technology and other discoveries in the arts. Some of the work that's going on among, we have great art department. Yeah. Those things all, I think, get me excited. So I'd say first it's students and their enormous potential for changing the world because of who we have on our campus. And second, I think discovery. That we're a research university, and that's all about discovery. And we do discovery better than most, and we do it in many different areas.
Right. And I know I'm going back to this Brew and Promise concept, but that discovery aspect is something that can expand not only in what you get in your inbox, but what's also accessible to alumni, right?
Yes.
You're on the cutting edge of discovery every day at this university. And how do we really create the ability for alumni to discover that alongside? So
yeah, and connecting, it's a way we hadn't really thought explicitly about. I haven't thought about connecting alumni more with the discovery process going on, where they can actually have better access to what's happening, because we try to keep alumni alert to big discoveries, but there's so many interesting things, and how we can actually make that available in an accessible way.
Right, and also connective, right, in the
Exactly.
discovery itself. And so, Chancellor Block, how do you, between the things that keep you up at night and the things that get you up excited in the morning, how do you find balance?
Balance.
Tough word, I know.
Yeah. It's hard. I have a new grandchild, so I have now 3 grandchildren. Actually went to the bowl game, the Sun Bowl game with the 2 boys, the little older grandchildren. That's fun. I mean, family is fun, and I had a great time. I mean, they had a great time, and I had a great time, and totally, it's just a different world when you're dealing with children, and
Yeah.
it's fun, and it really was fun. So those are the kinds of things I think that make it easier. I mean, when I'm here on campus, it's pretty much full time,
Yeah.
and it is.
I sometimes I do think that there is a clone of you because I will see you at one place and then another very quickly after. I don't know how you do it, but it's
And I have to say, Carol, my wife, is just as eager to be at places. So we rarely do things alone, and we do a lot of fun activities on campus. And campus is just, for her, she says, just a great cultural playground. You can go to a concert every evening, you can go to sports activities. There's just things happening on this campus. And we're very lucky because by living on campus,
right.
we can take full advantage. And I feel sorry sometimes, and it's just unfortunate that so many of our staff have to live at a distance because there's so much they could take advantage of if they were closer. And it's just one of the frustrations of LA is that, it's just too hard to commute back and forth. So it makes it harder for people to take full advantage of the campus, unfortunately.
Yeah. But again, that's why innovation and technology hopefully allows us from this point, it already has, but to really open up that energy and that experience of campus to,
Exactly. Well, you're exactly right. And you're part of that generation that will help make that happen. And
yeah. I wish I was a digital native. I think I'm technically on the cusp, but I feel very old every time I go to campus. I'm like, oh, I'm almost 10 years out at this point. So.
Oh, so old. So old.
Well, leading a university and especially university at this size is absolutely no feat. So you've been chancellor for 15 years. I spoke to your lovely wife about that as well. And she was like, I can't believe it's been 15 years. It's much longer than a typical tenure. So what's on your bucket list? What things are you still looking forward to? What's kept you in this job? And yeah.
Yeah, so then that's always a challenge. There's always more. I mean, it's the former chancellor. I remember saying Albert Carnesel, who was the chancellor before I was. He said that you have to recognize you enter a stream that's moving in a good direction. UCLA is moving in a good direction, and you leave the stream, and there's many things that you will not see completed. So that's philosophically, he's exactly right. So he started housing units, and I cut the ribbon, which is wonderful. I'm going to start projects and someone else cuts the ribbon. And that's just, you have to see yourself as part of a continuum of an institution that in theory goes on forever. I mean, that's the great thing about these, educational institutions like UCLA. So it is a challenge. You have to decide on what's the right length of time. I'm actually on the long side. I really am, as you point out, and I think that probably Franklin Murphy, one of our really celebrated chancellors, I was reading during COVID, I had a little time I took out on my bookshelf is his oral history. And I had a chance to read, and it's fascinating. There's stories about where the UCLA term came from, because that's not our official name, as you know. So it's great reading. But there was a discussion about, he said, well, he always believed that, the right amount of time for a chancellor or a president was 10 years.
Wow.
That 5 years is too short because you don't get to know your alumni well, or your community, or your legislators. But 10 is about right. And if you stay a little longer, I think was implicit, I'm not sure he said that, was, then it gets a little bit old. And and there needs to be transition. New leadership brings in new ideas. So I probably always thought about 10. And then a number of things happened. We were in the middle of a campaign.
Right.
And generally, you don't leave in the middle of a campaign. That's really not helpful. And then COVID arrived, and you certainly can't leave during COVID. That's not fair. You got to sort of find your way through that process. And then all of a sudden, you blink, and it wasn't 10 years, but it's 15 years. And so it's been a long time, that's to say. And I'm not sure that length is always good in these things. I mean, I think there is a sweet spot for all these jobs, and I think there's a shelf life. I don't think it's hard to tell what that shelf life is, but there's a shelf life. And so I think that is a challenge as I think about leadership. On the other hand, so that's the one hand. I recognize you
Oh, Chancellor Block, I think you are on mute.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. You're back.
I'm sorry. That just happened spontaneously. Someone has muted me.
I swear it wasn't me.
Is it like a hook when you're supposed to leave? No, I think, there's, as you talk about why, I hopefully wasn't unmuted when I was unmuted when I was discussing. I mean, there is a length of time that's right for these types of positions. On the other hand, there's just always a lot of enthusiasm. At least I have a lot of enthusiasm. We have some new projects that are very exciting, including the new campus, but also, planning for the fact that the Olympics is going to be here and how the campus prepares for that, and excitement about some new initiatives like this Immunology Institute, which is very exciting, and quantum sciences. We're looking at potentially a mini campus for that. So, that's the problem. There's always exciting things going on.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah, you have to
That's a
decide.
good sign.
You have to decide when it's time for you to watch it from the distance. And, my hope someday is to be able to watch it from the Semel Institute when I go back to the faculty, which is a real honor, I think.
Well, we are very grateful for the 15 years and hopefully the many years to come. And we're also very thankful for spending an hour with you here. So thank you so much, Chancellor Block, and giving us some great context. And also, I'm fired up. I'm like, let's go. Let's get this thing, on the road. But we as an alumni community, I think, are in such a pivotal season of innovation and connectiveness. And, Chancellor Block, you drive that for us. And so we're grateful for your insight and grateful for your time.
Thank you. But it's such a great place, as you know, Anne. I mean, it's just supercharged. You always have to be careful because every president, every chancellor is always very excited about their campus, as they should be. But this place is extraordinary. It just is by every dimension. Just look at the campus, look at what's been accomplished, look at the history of leadership that's come out of the campus, from students. So I think we're really blessed to have a remarkable group of people, and so enjoyable for all of us. But thank you.
Absolutely. And we're so grateful. Thank you so much, Chancellor Block.
Thank you.
Chancellor Block, just want to echo everything that Anne said. Thank you for being here today. And Anne, thank you for leading this conversation with Chancellor Block. It was so insightful and great to hear from both of you. I just want to take some time to thank those who are tuning in or who tuned in today. And we hope you can join us at our next Alumni Town Hall, which is actually happening this Thursday, January 12th at 3 p.m. It's a conversation around mystifying state commission and appointments. So if you are interested, please visit the link being thrown into the chat to register. Until next time, hope you all have a great night, and go Bruins.
Go Bruins.
Go Bruins.